The first time she touched me, it was because the hotel only had one bed. That is not the part that changed everything. It was what happened before that. I was 38, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Denver, the kind of place that looks fine in photos but feels quiet in a way that settles into your chest at night. I had been divorced for a year. No dramatic ending. Just two people who stopped knowing how to talk without disappointing each other. I worked as a senior operations analyst for a logistics company. Solid job. Good pay. Predictable hours. I was the steady one. The reliable one. The man people trusted with numbers and problems, but not necessarily with anything interesting. Most days felt the same. Wake up at 6. Coffee from the machine that always sputtered. Drive through traffic. Sit in a glass office building that reflected the sky but never let you feel it. She was the director of regional strategy. 15 years older than me. Sharp. Polished. The kind of woman who could walk into a boardroom full of loud men and make them quiet without raising her voice. Her name was Elaine Porter. The first time I really noticed her was in the conference room on the 14th floor. Quarterly review. Everyone stiff. Everyone pretending confidence. One of the younger VPs, a guy who liked to talk too loudly about CrossFit and crypto, interrupted her mid-sentence. "You know, Elaine," he said, smiling like he was being generous. "Maybe we need someone with a little more energy on this expansion. It's a fast market." Energy. The room went still in that subtle way it does when something ugly slips out dressed as a joke. She didn't flinch. Not outwardly. She just adjusted the papers in front of her and said, calm as ever, "If by energy you mean results, I've outlined them on slide 6. A few people chuckled politely. He shrugged. Moved on. But I saw it. The small pause before she spoke. The way her fingers pressed too hard against the edge of the table. The faint tightening around her mouth. I had seen that look before. My ex used to wear it when someone commented on her biological clock at family dinners. After the meeting ended, most people rushed out. I stayed back longer than usual, pretending to gather my laptop slowly. She was still at the head of the table, stacking her notes neatly, like she was putting something away that had nothing to do with paper. "That was out of line," I heard myself say. She looked up at me, surprised. "Excuse me?" "What he said?" "About energy." I shrugged, suddenly aware that she technically outranked me by several layers. "It wasn't about the market." For a second I thought I had overstepped. She studied me, almost evaluating whether I was sincere or just trying to score points. "It's fine," she said finally. "I've been in rooms like that for 20 years. That doesn't make it fine." She held my gaze a moment longer than necessary. Not flirtatious. Just measuring. "Thank you," she said quietly. It should have ended there. But 2 weeks later, HR announced that she and I would be traveling to Austin together for a 3-day strategic planning session with a potential partner firm. She needed someone who understood the operational side inside out. Apparently, that was me. We flew out on a Thursday afternoon. The flight was delayed. Storms over Texas. By the time we landed, it was past midnight. The hotel was near the river. Modern. Clean. Understaffed. There had been a booking mix-up. The front desk clerk looked exhausted as she explained that due to a conference in town, they had only one room left in our reservation block. One king bed. No other options within reasonable distance. I felt my face heat up before I even looked at Elaine. "I can find another hotel," I said quickly. The clerk shook her head. "Sir, everything within 10 miles is sold out." Elaine exhaled slowly. Not annoyed. Just tired. "It's one night," she said. "We have meetings at 8. We're adults." We were adults. Still, standing there with our carry-ons between us, I felt like a teenager who had been handed something dangerous. Up in the room, she set her suitcase near the desk. I stood awkwardly near the window, looking out at the dark river below. "I'll take the couch," I offered. She glanced at the small low seat in the corner. It barely looked long enough for a child. "You'll destroy your back," she said. "We have back-to-back meetings tomorrow. We need to function." There was no flirtation in her tone. Just practicality. It's a king, she added. We can survive a few feet of mattress. She said it calmly, professionally, as if she were discussing spreadsheets. I nodded. Right. Of course. We took turns in the bathroom. When I came out, she was already under the covers, sitting upright against the headboard, reading emails on her phone. Glasses perched low on her nose. Hair down now, softer without the boardroom tightness. I turned off the main lights and slid into the far edge of the bed, careful not to move the mattress too much. There was a safe distance between us. At least at first. The air conditioning hummed steadily. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. After a few minutes, she spoke into the dark. Did it bother you? She asked. What? What he said. In the meeting. I stared at the ceiling. Yeah. It did. Why? I hesitated. Because it wasn't about work. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, softer now, you get used to it. Being evaluated for things that have nothing to do with what you're capable of. There was something in her voice that wasn't director of regional strategy. Just a woman who was tired of proving herself. I turned my head slightly. In the dim light from the window, I could see her outline. The rise and fall of her breathing. You shouldn't have to get used to it, I said. Another pause. Thank you, she whispered. Somewhere in the night I shifted. Or maybe she did. The space between us narrowed without either of us commenting on it. Our arms brushed lightly. It was an accident. That's what I told myself. But neither of us moved away. I lay there, fully aware of the warmth of her beside me. The faint scent of her shampoo. The way the mattress dipped toward the center, almost encouraging closeness. Nothing inappropriate happened. Nothing crossed a line. But something changed. I could feel it in the silence. In the way my body felt suddenly too alert. In the way her breathing didn't quite settle into sleep for a long time. Staring into the dark, I realized I had made a choice the moment I spoke up for her in that conference room. And lying there in that hotel bed, a few inches apart, I understood that whatever this was, it wasn't going to stay simple. The next morning felt normal on the surface. We woke up early. No awkward jokes. No strange looks. She was already dressed in a navy suit when I came out of the shower. Hair pulled back again. Director mode fully restored. If anyone had walked into that room, they would have seen two professionals preparing for meetings. Nothing else. But I noticed small things. She avoided looking at the bed while packing. I kept my movements precise, almost careful. When our hands brushed reaching for the same room key on the desk, we both pulled back too quickly. Downstairs, we ordered coffee from the hotel bar because the lobby machine was broken. We stood side by side waiting. You sleep at all? I asked. Some, she said. Then, after a second, you. Enough. We didn't say more than that. We didn't need to. The meetings that day were intense. 8 hours of presentations, numbers, negotiations. At one point the partner firm tried to undercut our projections publicly. I started explaining the logistics model, walking them through the data. Halfway through, I felt her eyes on me. Not assessing. Supporting. When I finished, she picked up seamlessly, reinforcing my points, giving credit where it was due. As Daniel outlined, she said calm and clear, this isn't theory. It's operational reality. No one interrupted her this time. By the end of the afternoon, the deal was leaning in our favor. Back in the hallway outside the conference room, she let out a long breath. That was good, she said. You were solid in there. So were you. She smiled slightly. Not the polished corporate smile. Something smaller. Dinner? She asked. We should debrief. We found a quiet restaurant near the river. Dim lights. Low music. Not romantic, exactly. Just intimate in the way late evenings can be after long days. At first we talked about the deal. Forecasts. Risk margins. Office politics. Then the conversation shifted without either of us steering it. She asked how long I had been divorced. A year, I said. Officially. She nodded. Was it mutual? Eventually. She stirred her drink slowly. Those are the hardest ones. The ones that don't explode. They just fade. I looked up. You've been through that? Something like it. She didn't elaborate. I didn't push. After a few minutes she said, I was married once. Briefly. He didn't like that I traveled. Or that I earned more. Or that I didn't shrink when he needed to feel taller. She said it plainly. Not bitter. Just factual. That's not a small thing to shrink, I said. She looked at me carefully. Most people expect women to. I hesitated before speaking. For what it's worth, I don't. She held my gaze for a second longer than usual. Then she looked down at the table. You're different than I thought you were, she said quietly. Good different? Yes. That word stayed with me. By the time we walked back to the hotel, the air was warm. The city felt softer at night. She slipped off her heels halfway down the block and carried them in her hand. Don't tell anyone in the office, she said lightly. Your secret's safe. In the elevator, the space felt smaller than it had the night before. Not tense. Just charged in a quiet way. Inside the room, we moved around each other more easily this time. Familiar already. She sat at the edge of the bed to remove her earrings. I stood near the window again, pretending to check emails. Daniel, she said. I turned. About last night. She paused. Thank you. For being respectful. The fact that she felt the need to say that hit me harder than it should have. That shouldn't be a high bar, I said. She gave a small, tired smile. It is sometimes. Silence settled again. Not uncomfortable. I don't usually. She started, then stopped. Usually what? Let people see me off guard. I noticed. She looked up sharply. You did? Yeah. And I don't think it makes you weaker. She studied me for a long moment, like she was deciding something. I was 40 when someone in this company told me I was aging out of relevance, she said suddenly. Do you know what that does to you? My chest tightened. That's insane. I stayed, she continued. I worked harder. Became indispensable. But sometimes, she let out a small breath. Sometimes I wonder if they're just waiting. The room felt smaller now, but not because of the walls. They're not, I said firmly. You're the most competent person in that building. Her eyes softened. Careful, she said. Flattery from a subordinate could get you in trouble. I'm not flattering you. That made her laugh. A real one. She stood slowly. There were only a few steps between us. I shouldn't lean on you like this, she said quietly. It's not appropriate. Maybe not, I admitted. But I don't feel like you're leaning. I feel like you're talking. The space between us narrowed again, not by accident this time. Not fully intentional either. Just gravity. Her hand lifted slightly, then rested against my arm. Light pressure. Testing. I don't want to blur lines, she said. Neither do I. We were standing close enough now that I could feel her warmth through the thin fabric of my shirt. My body was very aware of her. The softness of her hair near her shoulders. The steady rhythm of her breathing. But what surprised me most wasn't the attraction. It was the trust. She looked up at me, searching my face. Not for permission. For safety. We should keep space, she whispered. Probably. Neither of us stepped back immediately. After a few seconds she did. Just enough. Separate sides, she said gently, almost smiling. Professional distance. Right. We turned off the lights again. This time, when we lay down, the gap between us was smaller from the start. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us adjusted. Minutes passed. Maybe more. In the dark, her hand found mine. Not urgently. Not boldly. Just fingers resting lightly over my knuckles. I froze at first. Then I turned my palms slightly so our hands fit together. We didn't say anything. We just lay there like that, two adults who knew better, holding hands in the quiet of a hotel room hundreds of miles from home. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized this wasn't just about attraction. It was about being seen. And that felt more dangerous than anything else. When we flew back to Denver, nothing about the office looked different. Same gray carpet. Same glass walls. Same hum of printers and quiet conversations near the break room. But something between us had shifted, even if no one else could see it. On the flight home, we kept things professional. She reviewed notes from the Austin meetings. I updated projections on my laptop. At one point our elbows touched on the armrest, and neither of us moved for a few seconds. It felt small, almost harmless, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. By Monday morning we were back in routine. She was Director Porter again. I was Daniel from operations. Meetings, deadlines, emails. Still, there were small changes. 2 days after we returned, she stopped by my desk late in the afternoon. No reason anyone would question. She asked about a revised timeline for the expansion rollout. I gave her the numbers. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful follow-up questions. It was all business. But before walking away, she paused just long enough to say she appreciated how I handled myself in Austin. Not loudly. Not publicly. Just enough for me to hear. It was the first time I had felt seen at work in a long time. A week later, she suggested we grab coffee downstairs to go over some budget adjustments. The cafe in the lobby was busy, loud enough to offer privacy without looking suspicious. We sat across from each other with spreadsheets open on our tablets. The conversation started with logistics. It drifted to office politics. She mentioned, almost casually, that a few senior executives had been pushing her to mentor someone younger, to eventually replace her. She said it with a half-smile, like she knew exactly what it implied. I told her it was short-sighted. That no one in that building carried strategy the way she did. She didn't brush it off this time. She listened. By October, coffee meetings became a quiet pattern. Once a week. Sometimes twice. Always framed around work. Sometimes genuinely about work. Sometimes not. We learned each other's rhythms. She liked her coffee black in the morning but added cream in the afternoon. She checked her phone less when she felt safe in a conversation. When she was stressed, she twisted the ring she still wore on her right hand, a simple gold band from her marriage that she had never bothered to replace with anything else. I found myself telling her things I had not told anyone since my divorce. How the silence in my apartment felt heavier on Sundays. How I had started eating dinner standing at the kitchen counter because sitting alone at the table felt too intentional. She didn't respond with sympathy. She responded with understanding. She admitted that her condo, despite its city views and expensive furniture, often felt like a showroom no one lived in. She said sometimes she left the television on just for noise. It was strange how easy it became. 2 weeks later, a work crisis forced us even closer. One of our major clients threatened to pull out of the expansion deal, citing projected delays that weren't actually ours. The numbers had been misinterpreted, possibly on purpose. The executive team panicked. Emergency meeting. Late night. She called me into her office after hours. The rest of the floor had mostly emptied. Through the glass walls, the city lights looked distant and cold. She asked me to walk her through the data again. I stood beside her desk, leaning over her laptop, explaining the model step by step. She asked sharp questions, pushing where she needed clarity. It wasn't personal. It was professional. Focused. At some point I realized how close we were standing. Her shoulder brushing my side. The faint scent of her perfume, softer at night. I forced myself to keep my attention on the numbers. We worked like that for 3 hours. By 10:30, we had built a revised presentation that made our case airtight. She sent it to the executive team with calm confidence. 15 minutes later, one of the senior partners replied with a short message thanking her for the clarity. She leaned back in her chair then, eyes closed briefly, relief visible in the way her shoulders dropped. She said she could not have done it without me. Not in a dramatic way. Just fact. That moment mattered more than I expected. After that night, something shifted again. We began texting occasionally. At first it was purely logistical. A question about a report. A reminder about a meeting. Then it became small check-ins. She would ask if I had eaten when she knew I was staying late. I would ask if she made it home safely after evening events. By November, we had fallen into a rhythm that felt both dangerous and comforting. Once a week, after work, We would walk 2 blocks to a quiet bar that no one from the office seemed to frequent. We always sat at the end, near the window. 1 drink each. Sometimes 2. We talked about everything except what was happening between us. She told me more about her early career, how she had been the only woman in certain rooms for years. How she had learned to lower her voice to be heard more seriously. How compliments about her appearance had faded as promotions increased, replaced by comments about her stamina and relevance. I listened. I asked questions. I told her she was still the most compelling person in any room she entered. She told me I underestimated myself. That steadiness was not the same as dullness. That reliability was a rare quality. The age difference hovered between us, unspoken but present. 15 years. Not small. She mentioned once that she had turned 53 in September. I had just turned 38. She said it lightly, but I saw the hesitation behind it. I told her age had nothing to do with capability. She gave me a look that said she had heard that before from men who did not mean it. I made sure she understood I did. By early December, the tension was no longer subtle. It showed up in longer eye contact during meetings. In the way she sometimes stood too close when reviewing documents at my desk. In the way my hand would rest on the small of her back when guiding her through a crowded hallway, just for a second longer than necessary. We had not crossed a clear line. But the air between us felt charged. One Friday evening, after a long week, we ended up back in her office again. It was late. The building mostly empty. Snow starting to fall outside the windows. She was reviewing year-end projections. I was sitting across from her, discussing potential cost savings. At some point the conversation slowed. She looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. She admitted she sometimes wondered if this would be the last big project she led. That maybe the company was grooming someone younger to take over within a year. I told her they would be foolish to push her aside. She said that companies did foolish things all the time. Silence settled. She stood and walked to the window. I followed a few steps behind, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. The city looked soft under the snow. Lights blurred slightly. She said she did not expect to feel this. Not at this stage of her life. She did not define what this was. She did not need to. I told her I had not expected it either. For a long moment either of us moved. Then she turned slightly, and I saw something in her expression that was no longer guarded. Her hand reached for mine. Not tentative this time. Certain. The line we had been carefully pacing around was right there between us. And I knew we were getting closer to stepping over it. By the time January settled in, pretending had started to feel dishonest. The holidays had given us distance. A week away from the office. A week of polite emails and restrained messages. I spent Christmas at my sister's house in Boulder, surrounded by noise and children and forced cheer. She spent it in her condo, hosting a small dinner for 2 friends from college. We texted on Christmas night. Nothing inappropriate. Just a quiet exchange about how the day had gone. Still, when her message came in close to midnight saying she hoped I was not feeling too alone, I felt something shift deeper than before. When we returned to work in the new year, everything felt sharper. More aware. The office was buzzing about upcoming restructuring. Rumors of leadership changes. Budget tightening. Promotions for some, exits for others. She looked composed in meetings, but I could see the strain. She had always carried pressure well, but this felt different. Personal. One afternoon, the crisis finally landed. The CEO announced that a new senior strategy advisor would be brought in. Younger. External hire. The unspoken message was clear. Fresh perspective. New energy. I watched her face during the announcement. She did not react publicly. She took notes. She asked measured questions about reporting structure. But afterward, when the room emptied, she stayed seated longer than usual. I hesitated in the doorway. Then I closed it behind me. She didn't look up at first. She was staring at the conference table like it had personally offended her. So I told her what everyone else was thinking but too careful to say. I told her the company would collapse without her institutional knowledge. I told her they were making decisions out of fear, not strategy. I told her she had built half of what they were now trying to refresh. She listened quietly. Then she admitted she was tired of having to prove she was still relevant. Tired of smiling through coded comments. Tired of wondering if she was being replaced slowly, politely. The vulnerability in her voice cut through me. I walked around the table without fully deciding to. I just needed to be closer. She didn't move away. She said she should not be leaning on me like this. That it was unfair. That I had my own career to protect. I told her I was not a child. That I knew the risks. She looked up at me then, really looked, and something in her expression softened into something unguarded. She said she had tried to keep this contained. That she had told herself it was admiration, mentorship, harmless connection. But that it had grown beyond that. My chest felt tight. I knew that feeling. So I said it first. I told her I was in love with her. The words surprised even me in how simple they sounded. No grand speech. No build-up. Just the truth sitting plainly in the air between us. For a second she did not respond. I saw the calculation behind her eyes. The consequences. The headlines in her head. Director involved with subordinate. Age gap. HR policies. Office gossip. She said this could ruin me? That I had more years to build than she did? I told her I did not care about years if they meant living cautiously and empty. Silence stretched. Then she stood. She said she had not expected to feel this again. Not at 53. Not after years of telling herself she was fine alone. She said being with me made her feel seen in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. Her voice shook slightly when she admitted she felt the same. She said she was in love with me too. It did not feel explosive. It felt steady. Certain. I reached for her face slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. The first kiss was not rushed. It was careful, almost reverent. Like we both understood the weight of it. Her hands slid up my chest and rested there, fingers curling lightly into my shirt. I felt her breath itch, felt the years between us disappear in that one shared moment. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. She said we needed to think clearly. That feelings did not erase reality. That we had to handle this properly if we were going to do it at all. I agreed. We sat down again, side by side this time, and talked through it like the professionals we were. We discussed reporting lines. The possibility of transferring me to another division. The necessity of informing HR before rumors had a chance to grow on their own. It was not romantic in the cinematic sense. It was practical. Responsible. But underneath the planning was something else. Relief. We were done pretending. Before leaving her office that night, she took my hand again. No hesitation now. She said if we were going to do this, we would do it honestly. No secrets. No hiding in hotel rooms or empty conference spaces. I told her I wanted that too. As I walked out into the cold January air, the city felt different. Nothing about the world had changed. But everything about my life had. Going to HR felt less romantic than falling in love. We scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday morning. Neutral conference room. Frosted glass walls. The head of human resources sat across from us with a legal pad and a careful expression. Elaine did most of the talking. Calm. Direct. She explained that we had developed a personal relationship and wanted to disclose it immediately to avoid any conflict of interest. She said we were prepared to adjust reporting lines. I added that I was willing to transfer departments if necessary. HR asked predictable questions. When had it begun? Whether there had been any pressure or imbalance. Whether either of us felt coerced in any way. We answered clearly. No hesitation. No defensiveness. By the end of the meeting, the solution was straightforward. I would move under a different director within 30 days. No salary change. No demotion. Just a structural shift. On paper, it was clean. In reality, it was anything but. Within a week, the whispers started. It was subtle at first. Conversations that quieted when one of us entered a room. A few sideways glances in meetings. Someone asking me, too casually, how I had managed such a convenient transfer. Elaine handled it with the same steady composure she handled everything. She did not over-explain. She did not apologize. She simply continued performing at a level no one could argue with. Still, the tone shifted. One afternoon I found an anonymous note in my inbox. No name. Just a line suggesting that some people knew how to climb faster than others. It was petty, cowardly. I deleted it. I did not tell her at first. I did not want to add weight to what she was already carrying. But she noticed something in my expression later that evening when we met for dinner at a small Italian place near her condo. She asked what had happened. I tried to brush it off. She pressed gently until I admitted it. Her jaw tightened in a way I had seen only in high-level negotiations. She said she had expected this. That people were often more comfortable assuming manipulation than accepting genuine connection. She worried more about my reputation than her own. For the first time since we had confessed our feelings, doubt crept in. That night, sitting across from her at her kitchen table, I told her maybe we should reconsider. Not because I did not love her, but because I did not want her legacy reduced to office gossip. I did not want my career framed as opportunistic. She listened without interrupting. Then she said something that steadied me. She said walking away out of fear would confirm every assumption people were already making. That hiding or retreating would suggest we had something shameful to conceal. She reminded me that we had done this properly. Transparently. Honestly. She asked me, quietly, whether I wanted to end it. I looked around her kitchen. The soft light over the counter. The wine glasses still half full. The city skyline visible through the window. And her, standing there in bare feet, tired but steady. I told her no. Over the next month, the pushback intensified before it began to ease. A few colleagues grew distant. One senior manager openly questioned my objectivity during a cross-departmental meeting, implying that I might be biased in projects that touched her division. It was subtle enough to avoid formal reprimand, but obvious enough to sting. I responded the only way I knew how. Work. I focused on performance with almost clinical precision. My new director, a pragmatic woman who valued results over drama, quickly realized I was delivering at a higher level than before. I volunteered for complex projects. Stayed late when necessary. Documented everything carefully. Meanwhile, Elaine faced her own version of scrutiny. Board members questioned her succession plans more aggressively. The newly hired advisor tried to assert dominance in meetings, often positioning himself as a modern corrective to her traditional strategy. She did not shrink. In fact, she grew sharper. We supported each other quietly. Late-night conversations about how to handle specific comments. Small reassurances when one of us had a rough day. We did not use the office as a hiding place for affection. We kept physical boundaries clear at work. Outside of it, though, we allowed ourselves to breathe. We spent more evenings at her place than mine. Her condo felt warmer now. Less like a showroom. She started cooking again instead of ordering takeout. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge one Saturday morning. It felt strangely intimate, standing in her kitchen with a screwdriver while she made coffee. By early spring, something unexpected happened. Results spoke. The expansion deal we had worked on in Austin outperformed projections by 12%. The operational efficiencies I had implemented under my new director were recognized in a company-wide meeting. My name was mentioned publicly, separate from hers. It mattered. The whispers did not vanish overnight, but they quieted. It became harder to dismiss my achievements as favoritism when I was no longer reporting to her. One afternoon, after a quarterly review, the same VP who had once commented on her energy congratulated her on steering the division through restructuring smoothly. The compliment was measured but real. Later, in her office, she admitted she had noticed the shift. Respect replacing suspicion, at least among those who valued competence. Still, the doubt never disappeared entirely. There were nights when she would lie awake beside me, staring at the ceiling, wondering whether she had compromised my future. There were moments when I questioned whether loving someone in a higher position would always come with this shadow. Each time, we chose the same answer. We chose each other. Not recklessly. Not blindly. Deliberately. The adversity did something unexpected. It strengthened the trust between us. Every conversation forced clarity. Every challenge required alignment. By the time summer approached, the relationship no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. By the time summer settled over Denver, our relationship had stopped feeling like a risk and started feeling like a life. It did not happen all at once. It was gradual. Quiet. One weekend in June, after months of spending most evenings at her place, I went back to my apartment to grab a few things. I stood in the middle of my living room and realized I had not slept there in almost 3 weeks. The space felt untouched. Like I had paused it. That night, back at her condo, I mentioned it casually. I said I might be wasting rent at this point. She did not respond immediately. She was drying dishes, her sleeves rolled up. After a moment, she said she had been thinking the same thing but did not want to pressure me. We talked it through the way we talked through everything. Practical first. Lease timelines. Closet space. How we would divide expenses. What it would mean professionally if things ever shifted again. Then the practical conversation softened. She admitted she liked waking up and hearing someone else move around in the kitchen. She liked that I left my shoes by the door in the same place every night. She liked that the condo no longer felt staged. I told her I liked that she read in bed instead of scrolling on her phone. That she hummed quietly while cooking. That her living room felt like somewhere I could rest. 2 weeks later, I moved in. There was no dramatic moment. Just boxes stacked neatly by the wall. My books sliding onto her shelves beside hers. My coffee mug joining her cabinet. We adjusted easily. Mornings became shared routines. She woke earlier than I did, usually reviewing emails with a cup of coffee in hand. I would join her at the counter, sometimes reading, sometimes just standing there beside her in silence. The silence was comfortable. We learned each other's small habits. She preferred the bedroom window cracked slightly at night, even in cooler weather. I tended to over-tighten jar lids. She liked the dishwasher loaded a specific way. I forgot sometimes, and she would quietly rearrange it without turning it into a lesson. It felt normal. At work, things had stabilized. I had been formally recognized for leading a cross-functional cost optimization initiative that saved the company a significant amount in the second quarter. The recognition came publicly, with clear metrics attached to my name. It shifted the narrative. No one could say I was advancing because of proximity to her. The data was there. She, meanwhile, had not faded under the new advisory structure. In fact, the board extended her contract another 2 years, citing continuity and performance. She told me that privately, the CEO had admitted they had underestimated how much institutional knowledge she carried. The age gap still existed. It did not disappear. Occasionally, in social settings, I noticed the way people tried to calculate our story when they learned the numbers. Sometimes there was surprise. Sometimes thinly disguised judgment. She noticed it too. One evening, after a company event, she asked me directly whether I ever felt embarrassed introducing her as my partner. I did not hesitate. I told her I felt proud. She studied my face carefully, as if looking for cracks. When she found none, she relaxed. By late August, the conversation about long-term plans began to surface naturally. Not forced. Not strategic. Just honest. We talked about what the next decade might look like. Whether she would eventually step back from corporate life. Whether I wanted to pursue an executive path or stay in operations where I felt most competent. She told me she did not want to be the reason I limited myself. I told her she was not limiting anything. The proposal did not happen the way I once imagined proposals were supposed to. There was no ring hidden in a dessert. No public spectacle. It happened on an ordinary Sunday evening in October. We had spent the day reorganizing a spare bedroom into a shared office. Papers everywhere. Laughter over how many cables we both owned. At some point, she sat down on the floor, leaning back against the wall, looking tired but content. I sat beside her. The room smelled faintly of dust and fresh paint from a minor patch job we had done. Outside, the light was fading into that soft early autumn blue. I realized in that moment that I did not want a version of my future that did not include her sitting beside me in rooms like this. Doing ordinary things. So I told her that. I told her I did not want to keep calling this temporary or undefined. I said I wanted to build something permanent. Not because of age. Not because of pressure. but because this felt like home. She did not speak immediately. Her eyes filled slightly, not dramatically, just enough to change the way she was looking at me. She asked if I was sure. She reminded me again of the years between us, of the realities of health and time. I told her I was not marrying a statistic. I was marrying a person. That made her laugh softly through the emotion. I did not kneel. We were already sitting on the floor. I simply took her hand and asked if she would marry me. She said yes. There was no applause. No witnesses. Just the quiet of our half-finished office and the steady rhythm of our breathing. Later that week, we picked out a ring together. Simple. Elegant. Nothing excessive. Telling people was easier than we expected. My sister hugged her tightly the first time they met as an engaged couple. A few colleagues offered genuine congratulations. Some seemed surprised but said nothing negative. It was not a fairy tale. It was steadier than that. By the time winter approached again, the condo no longer felt like hers or mine. It felt like ours. We kept the wedding small on purpose. After everything we had walked through, neither of us wanted a spectacle. We did not need to prove anything to a room full of distant relatives or corporate acquaintances. We chose a quiet venue near the waterfront just outside Denver. Early spring. Clear sky. A light breeze that made the water ripple gently behind the ceremony space. About 40 people came. Close friends. My sister and her family. 2 of Elaine's oldest friends from college. A few colleagues who had stood by us without turning our relationship into office entertainment. The morning of the wedding felt strangely calm. I woke up before her, the way I usually did on important days. The condo was quiet. Sunlight coming through the bedroom window in soft stripes. She was still asleep, one hand resting loosely on the pillow where I had been. For a moment, I just watched her breathe. There was something deeply grounding about that. No boardroom. No HR meetings. No gossip. Just a woman I loved, asleep beside me. She woke slowly and smiled when she saw me looking at her. No dramatic excitement. Just warmth. We got ready in separate rooms at the venue. Not out of superstition. Just logistics. Standing there adjusting my tie, I thought about the first conference room where I had seen someone question her energy. I thought about the hotel room in Austin. About the HR meeting. About the anonymous email. About every small moment where we could have chosen fear. Instead, we had chosen each other. The ceremony itself was simple. She walked down the aisle without music at first. Just the sound of footsteps on wood and quiet breathing from the guests. She wore a dress that was elegant without trying too hard. No attempt to look younger. No attempt to compete with anyone's expectations. She looked exactly like herself. When she reached me, she took my hands the same way she had in that conference room months ago. Steady. Certain. Our vows were not poetic. We wrote them ourselves, but we kept them grounded. I told her I admired her strength long before I loved her. That I promised to stand beside her, not in front and not behind. That I would never ask her to shrink. She promised to keep choosing honesty over fear. She promised to protect what we had built together. She said I had reminded her that she was not past her prime, just past pretending. There were tears, but they were quiet. When the officiant pronounced us married, it did not feel like a dramatic turning point. It felt like confirmation of something that had already been true for a long time. At the reception, we did not do anything elaborate. Good food. Wine. Conversations that lasted longer than planned. One of the senior managers who had once questioned my objectivity came up to shake my hand. He said he respected how we had handled everything. It was not effusive, but it was sincere. Elaine noticed. She squeezed my hand under the table. Later in the evening, my sister made a short toast. She said she had watched me go through my divorce quietly, carrying disappointment like it was something to be managed instead of felt. She said she had not seen me this settled in years. Elaine's friend from college spoke too. She mentioned how Elaine had once sworn off marriage entirely, convinced that chapter had closed. She said it took courage to reopen it. There were no dramatic speeches about destiny. No declarations about beating the odds. Just acknowledgement. We danced slowly near the end of the night, after most guests had left. The venue staff were clearing tables in the background. The music was low. She rested her head lightly against my shoulder. I felt the weight of it in a way that felt sacred, not heavy. She whispered that people had told her it would not last. That a younger man would eventually want someone younger still. That I would grow resentful. That she would slow me down. I told her the only thing that had ever slowed me down was doubt. Standing there, married, with her hands resting at my waist, I realized something simple. We had not proven anyone wrong through argument. We had proven them wrong by living well. When we left the venue that night, the air was cool again. Almost exactly 1 year since that first trip to Austin. We drove home together, her hand resting easily over mine on the center console. Nothing felt dramatic. It felt steady. And steady, I had learned, was enough. It has been 3 years now. Sometimes I think back to that conference room, to the moment someone tried to reduce her to a number disguised as a comment about energy. If I had stayed quiet, my life would look completely different. Not worse, maybe. Just smaller. Before her, I thought stability was enough. A decent job. A clean apartment. No major disruptions. I told myself that was maturity. That wanting more was unrealistic. But loneliness can hide inside stability very easily. She taught me that steadiness does not mean silence. That reliability does not mean invisibility. That you can be calm and still choose something bold. I also learned that age, the thing people fixate on so easily, is mostly noise. It is an easy shorthand for assumptions. People assume power imbalance. They assume motives. They assume expiration dates. What they do not see are the ordinary evenings. The shared grocery lists. The way she still reads in bed while I pretend not to watch her. The way I make her coffee every morning without asking how she takes it. Love did not arrive like a dramatic rescue. It arrived in small choices. Choosing to speak up in a meeting. Choosing to sit beside her when it would have been easier to walk away. Choosing transparency instead of secrecy. Choosing to stay when gossip made things uncomfortable. There were moments when fear would have been simpler. Walking away would have protected reputations. It would have avoided whispers. But it would have cost us something quieter and more permanent. We did not ignore the obstacles. We faced them directly. HR meetings. Structural changes. Professional scrutiny. None of that disappeared because we felt strongly about each other. What changed was our willingness to stand inside it together. She no longer wonders if she is aging out of relevance. I no longer wonder if I am too ordinary to matter. We found something in each other that did not rely on outside approval. If there is anything I understand now, it is this. Second chances do not announce themselves loudly. They show up looking inconvenient, complicated, slightly risky. And most people walk away because it feels safer. But sometimes, the safer choice is the one that keeps you small. One decision, made quietly in a conference room, can open a door you did not even know you were allowed to walk through. Love is not about ignoring reality. It is about facing it with someone who does not ask you to shrink. Your story does not end because someone else thinks you have reached a certain age. It does not end because you have been divorced. It does not end because other people are uncomfortable. It continues the moment you decide you are enough as you are. Ours did. And it started with something as simple as refusing to stay silent.